listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me, non-judgmental talk about infidelity with Dr. Marie Murphy. If you're looking for new perspectives on complicated relationship issues, you've come to the right place.
Days go by, they're crawling by.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Marie Murphy. I'm a relationship coach, and I help people who are engaging in anything they think counts as infidelity to deal with their feelings, clarify what they want, and make decisions about what they're going to do. No shame, no blame, no judgments. If you are in the midst of an infidelity situation and you would like my help resolving it in a way that's truly right for you, let's work together. You can schedule an introductory coaching session with me through my website, mariemurphyphd.com, and you can also learn about the coaching packages I currently offer as well as my current pricing on the services page of my website. Before I get into the meat of today's episode, I want to tell you all that I am going to experiment with doing an Ask Me Anything podcast episode, meaning you get to send me questions and I will answer them if possible and if appropriate on the podcast. If you want to ask me a question, which I will potentially answer on a future episode, you can go to my website. And at the very top right-hand corner of the homepage, it says contact. If you click where it says contact, you'll be taken to a contact form where you can send me a message with the question you'd like me to answer on the show. My website is mariemurphyphd.com. And again, you can use the contact form to send me a question you'd like me to answer on a future episode of this podcast. Now, here's the thing. I've never done this before. I've never put out an offer to answer listeners' questions before, so I have no idea how this is going to go. It could be that no one takes me up on this offer and no one sends me any questions. It could be that people send me all kinds of questions, but they're not all that well suited to being answered on the show. It could be that I get 1,000 questions that are well suited to being answered on the podcast, and I make this a multi-episode thing. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I invite you to be a part of this adventure/experiment with me. I don't want to attempt to over-determine the kinds of questions that are and are not suited for this experiment, but I will say this. Concise, specific questions are generally good, and broad, vague questions are generally not so good. If you send me a whole long thing about your situation and you say, "What should I do?" my answer will be, it sounds like you might need to book yourself a coaching session with me and consider working with me on an ongoing basis. So let's start with that guidance and see how it goes from there. Again, to send me your questions, use the contact form on my website, mariemurphyphd.com. Oh, and this is really important. I will not associate your question with your name. This process will be anonymous. Again, I will not associate your question with your name. Your identity will not be made known on the podcast if I answer a question you submit. All right. With all of that said, let's get down to the business of today's episode, which is loving your decisions or making the best of your decisions. We have the option to commit to loving decisions we've already made and to loving decisions before we make them. And today I will explain what I mean by this and why doing this can be so helpful. As many previous episodes have probably made quite evident, or as you may know from your own experience, one of the bigger cross-cutting themes my clients struggle with is making decisions. And I don't think that this is very surprising because there are some pretty unhelpful ideas about decisions and decision-making out there in the cultural fog that many of us are likely to have encountered. For one thing, we've collectively bought into the idea, at least to a great extent, that there is such a thing as right decisions and such a thing as wrong decisions, or good decisions and bad decisions. And with that, A lot of us share the vague but powerful belief that if we make a bad decision or a wrong decision, we'll be kind of doomed. Or maybe not just kind of doomed, but really doomed. So on a certain level, we may kind of believe that any choice we make has the potential to be pretty loaded. If we choose well, we'll be in great shape. And if we don't choose well, we might be screwed for life. That's pretty high stakes. And then on top of all of that, many of us have never learned any tools for making decisions. We haven't learned any processes for making decisions. We haven't learned how to make decisions in any kind of systematic or deliberate way. We haven't learned how to deal with obstacles that may get in the way of making decisions at all, or in the way of making decisions that we feel good about. So not only are decisions super high stakes, perhaps, but we don't have great tools for doing this super high stakes thing, i.e. making decisions, which interestingly is something that we have to do all the time in life. And that alone is bad enough. That's enough to deal with. But on top of all that, we collectively tend to think that decisions about relationships are even higher stakes than other decisions we might make in life. And then if we throw infidelity into the mix, the belief that many of us share, at least to an extent, is that our decisions about what we do about our relationships when infidelity is involved have not only high stakes, but stratospherically high stakes. In other words, we tend to think that there are right and wrong decisions about how to deal with infidelity situations. And if we make those wrong decisions, we'll be doomed to regret our choices and live lives of despair and misery and whatever. And there's absolutely no way to get ourselves out of this if we get there in the first place. That's kind of intense, right? So, perhaps not surprisingly, one of the more common things I do with clients who are dealing with infidelity in one way or another is help them make their decisions more makeable. I help people clarify the stakes of the decisions they're making. I help them deal with obstacles to decision making. And one of the common obstacles to decision making, one of the common things that gets in the way of making decisions is the fear of making a decision that you will later regret. And this too, I think, is totally understandable given our rather unhelpful beliefs about decisions, some of which I just outlined a moment ago, and given that there is a common belief out there that regret is something that can just happen to us and is really bad if it does just happen to us. So it's not surprising that so many of us fear making decisions which we might later regret, and fear making decisions because we might later regret them, right? So regret and how we can minimize it and deal with it when it does happen is something that I've talked about on other episodes, such as episode 126, which is called Regret is Optional, and episode 59, which is called Is the Grass Always Greener? But as I talk about in those episodes, the good news is we don't have to fear regret, and we can make decisions thoughtfully and deliberately and systematically. We can manage our minds and consciously relate to our emotions before, during, and after making a decision. And when we learn how to do those things and then actually do them regularly, we can live our lives with a lot less unnecessary drama and suffering. We can make decisions reasonably efficiently instead of getting stuck in indecision. And thus, we can keep moving forward in our lives rather than staying stuck and stagnating. So today, I'm going to talk more about something I've mentioned on other podcast episodes, which is committing to loving decisions ahead of time or making the best of decisions we've made. And I mentioned this as a means of minimizing regret in episode 126, Regret is Optional. And today I'm going to talk more about how we can actually do that. Before I get into that though, let me outline the steps I think are important for you to follow, or at least consider following, if you have a decision to make. The first is, you want to get really clear on what exactly the nature of your decision is, or what the choice you're trying to make looks like. What exactly are you trying to decide? Are you trying to make a choice between various options? If so, what are those options? Clarify these things as much as you can. The second step is to honestly and thoroughly consider why you might choose the various options that are available and why you might not choose those options. Doing this step well is such an important part of the decision-making process, and there are a lot of things that can get in the way of doing this step well. For instance, it can be really hard to consider what we want if we don't believe that it's okay for us to want certain things. If that's the situation we're in, we may need to take a look at our beliefs and perhaps work on changing our beliefs to consider that we might indeed have permission to want what we want before we can make a decision that we feel good about, right? And that can take some work. It doesn't have to take forever, but it can take some work. And what I want to suggest is that that effort is worth it. Anything you need to invest in honestly and thoroughly considering your options when you have an important decision to make is worth it, in my opinion. After we've thoroughly considered our options and thoroughly considered why we might or not want certain options, we get to choose which option we prefer. We get to say, I want to do this and not that for the following reasons. Simply weighing our options won't make a decision for us. Even after we have very thoroughly considered why we might want one thing versus another thing, or one thing versus many other things, we still have to actively decide what we want and select it, or decide what we're going to do about it. And this could be step 3 in the decision-making process that I'm outlining, or it could be step 4. The other thing that we have the opportunity to do when we're making decisions, which could be either step 3 or step 4, is recognize that no matter what we choose to do, we may have mixed thoughts and mixed feelings about our decision. In other words, no matter what we choose to do, we may not feel total relief or total satisfaction or total happiness or total whatever. We may not feel a complete absence of doubt or uncertainty or sadness or even regret. And what I want you to consider early and often when you're making a decision is that this doesn't have to be a problem. I want you to consider that it's reasonable to have mixed thoughts and mixed feelings about any major choice or major change you make in your life. It's even possible to have mixed thoughts and feelings about minor choices and changes we make in our lives, right? But we can decide that we don't need to interpret mixed feelings as an indication that we are making or might have made a bad choice or the wrong decision. And fifth, we can go into decisions with a commitment to make the best of our choices. We can plan to do this while we're making a choice and after we've made a choice. And as I'll talk about today, we can decide that we're going to love decisions that we've made, even if we didn't make those decisions all that systematically. Even if we made a decision haphazardly, even if you didn't do any of the kinds of things that I just talked about doing in the process of making your decision, you can still commit to making the best of it. So let's start off by talking about how you can commit to loving a decision before you've made a decision or before you've taken action in the service of your decision. To return to an example that I use far too often, let's say you are considering leaving your marriage, in part because you want to have the opportunity to pursue a relationship with someone else. You have the opportunity to get really clear on why you might choose to leave your marriage and why you might not choose to leave your marriage. You can search your soul and make lists of why you might and might not choose to pursue the options that are available to you. And you can make these lists of reasons as honest and detailed and comprehensive as you possibly can. And then you get to decide which of these sets of reasons you would prefer to live with. Which of these sets of reasons are good enough reasons for you to make a decision? When people start to consider why they might do one thing versus another, and consider that they can simply decide what they prefer to do based on their own reasons, they sometimes start to balk. Sometimes people think they aren't allowed to make decisions based on their own preferences. Sometimes people think that the process of making a decision can't really be this simple. And sometimes people say things like, well, I might know what I want now, but how can I make a decision when I don't know what I'll want in the future? I don't know how I would feel if I were to actually get divorced. Or I don't know how I would feel if I were to give up my relationship with my affair partner and recommit to my spouse. Here's the thing, people. If you've been saying this or anything along these lines, you are, in a sense, quite correct. The future hasn't happened yet, so we can't be sure how we will feel in the future. That's true. But we don't have to let this become or remain a reason why we don't make decisions. You can make a decision based on what you know you want right now, and you can commit to appreciating the experience of having those things, having what you want in the future. And you may already be doing exactly this in certain ways or in certain areas of your life that you might not fully recognize. So for instance, if you have ever gone on a vacation, you have probably decided what you were going to enjoy about going on vacation. In making the decision to go on vacation, you probably decided that you wanted to enjoy the experience of going on vacation, period, right? You probably decided what specifically you wanted to enjoy about your vacation. And more importantly, you probably started planning to enjoy your vacation, even if you weren't aware that you were doing this. Now, it might also be possible that you anticipated possible challenges or annoyances that could come with the great stuff on vacation, but you probably chose to focus on the things that you planned to enjoy, right? So if you ever took an airplane to go on vacation, you probably didn't get on that plane thinking, well, like the plane might crash and that might be terrible, right? You're probably thinking this plane is going to get me to this place that I really want to visit. Now, that said, of course, if you were worried about the plane crashing, you probably dealt with that fear in some reasonably productive way, or at least you could have, because you decided that you wanted to go on vacation and you didn't want anything to get in the way of that, right? You have the power to do this same kind of thing in other areas of your life too. And it may sound simple, and it is, but we so often forget that our power to focus is a superpower. What we focus on matters. If we focus on what we don't like or what we think we're not going to like about any situation, we're going to have a very different experience of that situation than we will if we focus on what we do like about it or what we do plan to like about it. No matter how badly you might want to go on a vacation, you could still go and have a really bad time if you focused on aspects of the experience that you didn't like. If you want to look for things that you dislike about an experience, you will quite likely find things to dislike, even if you're going on vacation in a place that, other people might think is wonderful. And if you then focus on all the things you don't like about an experience, you probably will not have a great time. You will not have a great experience at all. Now, just to be clear, I'm not suggesting that it's a problem to acknowledge things we dislike in life. I think it's very important to acknowledge what we don't like in life. But there's a difference between identifying what we dislike and doing something about it and indulging in fixating on things we don't like just because that's where our minds want to go. So, quite simply, what you have the option to do is decide that you're going to make a choice about what you're going to do with your infidelity situation for reasons that you like, and then commit to making the best of that choice by focusing on what is great about living in your decision and dealing with the not so great stuff without making that stuff mean that you made the wrong decision. And when you do this ahead of time, meaning when you do this as you are making a decision or before you make a decision, it can be so powerful. You can decide in advance that you have the power to make a choice for reasons that you feel great about. And then you can decide that you have the power to make living in that choice great. And then you can prove yourself right. And that's pretty amazing. So if you are in the process of making a decision or you're on the cusp of making a decision, what is going to be great about the choice you're making? What is going to be great about pursuing the option that you think you're going to pursue? Get as specific as you can in your answers and start enjoying how great the thing is going to be now. And as you live into your decisions, commit to focusing on what you know is going to be great and what you know you're going to love about living into your decisions. And as it's actually happening, commit to appreciating all of that stuff. And then do that again. And then do it again and again and again and again and again. So often we think that our enjoyment of our life circumstances is beyond our control. We think, or we sort of think, that if we like something or we like a particular situation or set of circumstances, that's just sort of happened to us, right? This enjoyment has just sort of come to us without our doing. But that's not exactly what's going on. We are either consciously or unconsciously choosing to enjoy and appreciate our lives or a certain situation in our lives or aspect of our lives. And choosing to do this unconsciously is fine, but when we use the power that we have to appreciate things on purpose, we can consciously and deliberately enjoy our experience of being alive even more. And this is a pretty great thing to get in the habit of doing. Now, choosing to focus on what we enjoy and appreciate about living in the context of a decision we've made doesn't mean that we're necessarily ignoring or minimizing the aspects of our decision that we may not be all that enthusiastic about. But choosing to focus on what we do like helps put the things that we don't like into perspective. We can remind ourselves that we made a decision in order to give ourselves the opportunity to pursue certain things. And we can remind ourselves why it was and is important to us to pursue those things. And we can actively appreciate those things and enjoy those things. And we can deal with the things that we don't love about living in our decision or decisions in a way that serves us well. And we can always choose again if we want to. And I'll say a little bit more about those last 2 points in a bit. First, I'm going to talk about how we can love our decisions and make the best of choices we've made, even if we did not make our decision or decisions very systematically. Let's just use an example here. Let's say that you were married and you got involved with someone else rather suddenly. And before you had a chance to make heads or tails of what was going on, before you had a chance to make any sense of your situation, your spouse found out about what you were doing. And they basically told you, look, it's me or them, and you need to decide right now. And let's say that you chose them, meaning you chose to pursue the relationship with your new paramour and you chose to leave your marriage. And maybe this all happened really fast. Maybe you made some pretty major life decisions in a few weeks or a few months, or rather suddenly, or in your opinion. And quite quickly, your life changed in some pretty significant ways. And then some time passed and the dust settled a little bit and you started to get used to living your new life. And then you kind of went, oh my God, what have I done? Did I do the right thing? All of that happened so quickly. What was I thinking? Here's the thing. When life changes quickly, whether through choices we've made or not, it's not unreasonable to experience a little whiplash, shall we say. Especially if we've been living a certain way for a long time and all of our life changes in a short period of time, or there are some really big changes in our life in a short period of time. It's not unreasonable for us to freak out a little bit over the unfamiliarity of our new circumstances. When things are different, it's not unreasonable to find them a little strange. But so often we make it mean that there's a problem when we experience something to be a little strange. We don't have to do that, though. We can understand strangeness as a component of unfamiliarity. And unfamiliarity is, pretty much by definition, a component of new experiences, even new experiences that we already know we really like, and also of new experiences that we might want to give ourselves a chance to explore and enjoy. So, the first thing I encourage you to do if you've made a big decision and you're not sure whether you like it or not is recognize that the strangeness or unfamiliarity of your new circumstances does not mean that you quote unquote made the wrong choice. Even if there were such a thing as a wrong choice, it doesn't necessarily mean that you made the wrong choice. But there isn't such a thing as a wrong choice. The second thing I want you to consider is that you have the opportunity to actually answer one of the questions you might already be asking yourself, which I posed a moment ago, and that's the question of, what was I thinking? It's actually a good question to ask yourself if you plan on answering it. It's not a good question to ask yourself if you don't plan on answering it and instead you just keep on asking it over and over again. You don't want to do that. So let's go back to the example I just mentioned in which the hypothetical you was married and you got involved with someone else, and before you had a chance to even carefully considering what was going on in your infidelity situation, before you had a chance to even think about making a systematic decision about what you wanted to do, you got busted. And then your spouse told you you had to make a choice and you decided to leave your marriage and pursue a relationship with your affair partner or the person who you might not have even begun to really think of as your affair partner yet. What might you have been thinking when you made that quick decision? If you have made a decision quickly, I want you to actually answer the question of what you were thinking when you made that quick decision. Now, to get back to my example here, I can tell you what some folks were thinking when they were in that kind of situation. Some folks think to themselves, well, I know I'm not happy in my marriage. I know I haven't been happy for a really long time. I know I'm happy with this other person I've gotten involved with, like really happy. And I know I want more of this kind of happiness in my life. And I think life's too short not to go for this and pursue this kind of experience. So that's what some people are thinking. That's not necessarily what everyone's thinking. But the point is that it's important for you to get as clear as you can on exactly what you were thinking when you made your decision and allow yourself to see the legitimacy in what you were thinking then. Whatever may have happened since making your quick decision to leave your marriage and pursue your other relationship, your reasons for making that decision when you did may have been totally legitimate for you at the time, even if you came to your reasoning pretty quickly, or your reasoning process went pretty quickly and you came to your decision pretty quickly. And moreover, the reasons why you made your decision may still be reasons that you consider legitimate. Wanting to leave a relationship you weren't happy with is legitimate. Wanting to pursue a relationship you enjoy is legitimate. You can decide to recognize the legitimacy of what you were thinking, and you can decide to believe that you made the best decision you could at the time you made it. Now, let's emphasize that thinking that way is a choice. You could also choose to see your reasons for making your decision as irrational, or not good enough, or too hasty, or not legitimate. And a lot of us default to this kind of thinking. Instead of choosing to view our decisions as legitimate, we default to second-guessing ourselves or doubting ourselves. And I want to suggest that this isn't very helpful, especially if we are talking about a decision that you have already made. What could you possibly get out of questioning a decision you've already made or beating yourself up for either a choice you've made or the process by which you made that choice? Not much is usually the answer. Not much of anything great anyway. Sometimes when we make a big decision, we feel some doubt, and sometimes we let our doubt get in the way of recognizing the certainty we do feel. And what I encourage you to do is allow yourself to focus on what you are certain of. Why was it legitimate for you to have made the decision you did? What do you like about the decision now that you're living in it? Again, to echo something I've already said, thinking this way doesn't mean you have to ignore your doubts or concerns or dislikes. But you probably don't want to dwell in your doubts. And if you don't, you may have to actively manage your mind to stay focused on other things. For many of us, our minds love to indulge in doubting and second guessing. That is definitely a thing, and it's a very human thing, but you don't have to stay in that mode of thinking, and you probably don't want to. So again, if you want to love a decision that you have already made, you can recognize that you probably made your choice for reasons that were pretty good at the time. You can allow yourself to see and respect the logic in what you were thinking at the time. You can understand and appreciate why you chose what you did at the time, even if you wouldn't necessarily make the same choices again now. Now, here's the other thing that I want you to consider. What if it's possible that you would have made exactly the same choices that you did, even if you made those choices in a different way or through a different decision-making process? Sometimes people will say things like, well, I'm not sorry that I left my marriage, but I wish I hadn't left it so hastily. I really shouldn't have done that. Or, I wish I had done a few more things before I made my final decision about what to do about my marriage. Now, one of the problems with this kind of thinking is that it keeps us focused on things we have no power over, namely things that have already happened. But the other problem with this kind of thinking is that it contains the assumption that we might have made a different choice if we'd approached our decision differently, and we might not have. And moreover, we'll never know. And this way of thinking also contains the assumption that a different choice might have been better for us. And this is both an assumption and an unhelpful one. Instead of worrying about what's already happened or second guessing what you've already decided, why not start making the best of choices you've made in the present, right? Right now, in this very moment, you have the capacity to direct your focus to what is awesome about your current experience. You have the capacity to love things about your current experience, including the aspects of your current experience that are direct results of decisions you've made, right? Why not try that out? Why not try to appreciate as much as possible about what you have going on right now? Now, it is entirely possible that even when you do this, even when you commit to making the best of a decision, you still don't like it very much. And that's okay. Loving your decisions doesn't mean you're stuck with them forever. Making the best of your decisions doesn't mean you commit to sticking with choices you really don't like. But it's hard to get clear on which decisions we want to stick with and which we don't want to stick with when we don't look for what's great about living out the choices we've made. If we're continuously focused on what's wrong, we're going to have a very hard time finding satisfaction. In fact, we may never find satisfaction. So, in conclusion, as you commit to loving your choices, it's important to remember that one choice or one set of choices never dooms us for good. We can always choose again and again and again if we want to. But there's a difference between choosing again from the standpoint that you made a quote unquote bad decision and you need to fix things, and from the standpoint that you're making choices as best as you can, and you're refining your sense of what you want and bolstering your capacity to go after what you want as you do so, right? And trusting that you're going to make the best of your decisions before you choose to do something different, right? Okay, everybody. That is it for today. If you would like my help making choices in regards to your infidelity situation for reasons that you like and committing to making the best of your decisions, let's work together. It is one thing to hear me talk about this stuff on the podcast, and it's another thing entirely to make use of what I talk about in your own life. And one of the great reasons to work with me is to have my help applying helpful tools and concepts to the specifics of your infidelity situation. When you're ready to work with me, you can schedule an introductory coaching session through my website, mariemurphyphd.com. I offer compassionate, confidential coaching via Zoom, which means we can work together no matter where you're located. I can't wait to meet you. Okay, before I wish you a great week and say bye for now, I want to remind you that you can submit a question for my Ask Me Anything podcast episode through my website, mariemurphyphd.com. Just click on that contact tab at the top right-hand corner of the homepage and submit your question using the contact form. If I answer your question on an episode, I will not associate your name with the question. And with that, I wish you all a great week. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me with Dr. Marie Murphy. Make sure to click subscribe to get updates on our latest episodes.